Kei ngā kahika o te Nehenehenui, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Nau mai a haere mai ki te whare o te reo irirangi o Maniapoto. Welcome to another webinar series, Te Puna Kōrero o te Nehenehenui. This platform is where we kōrero with experts within their respective fields, discussing what matters to you and your whānau, and also giving you an opportunity to ask questions from the experts directly. You can pop your questions in the Facebook comments section below, and we will ask as many of those questions as we can this evening. Well, as we have all come to experience, no one was spared from the disruptions of the COVID-19 pandemic. The fear and anxiety of contracting the virus brought a kind of change that is unprecedented, with our personal lives being forced to adapt to a new kind of normal. And as a consequence, our way of thinking, our attitudes, and our behaviors have radically shifted and are no longer the same as we knew it. So as we begin to adjust to our new normal, and with winter fast approaching, we look towards our inner health and well-being to see what we can do to look after ourselves. And so we dive into the world of our immune system, a complex network of cells and proteins that defends the body against infection. However, we will take a look at our immune system through a traditional and cultural lens. And so tonight's session, we have a wānanga with our very own Rongoa Māori experts asking, how do we best maintain a strong immune system as we head into winter and as we learn to cope with the new normal? And so to help share their experiences and knowledge, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Pia Rongo and Nick Poa to tonight's show. Ia kurangatira, tēnā kōrero. It's lovely to have you both with us this evening. Before we begin talking about our immune systems and all of those wonderful things, could we kind of take a step back and ask if you both could share with us a little bit about yourself and I guess your journey into the world of rongoa Māori. And if I could start with you, Pia, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe. Kia ora everybody, I'm Pia Rongo. So my journey with rongoa started about probably 4 years ago, and I got put into a position pretty much where I had no choice but to stop ignoring the signs, and that all come down to my belief system. I didn't believe these things were happening. I didn't believe that it was my calling, and in the end, it's brought me to this place, and I'm really enjoying the journey it's taken me on. I've learnt about prevention is better than when we're sick. And so that's what I like to promote, is in a holistic wellbeing as well. And so kia ora, over to you, Nick.
Kia ora cousins and kia ora whānau. So my introduction to rongoa, when I use the term rongoa, I'm talking about more than Māori medicine. I talk about the whole paradigm of Māori healing and all the tools that are utilised within it. Some of you may also be familiar with mirimiri. So within rongoa, within the tool of mirimiri, that was introduced to me when I was about 5 years old. My grandmother, that most people know here, Hene, she came and picked me up in Hamilton. And we drove all the way through at night time to Tikawiti here to her father, my great-grandfather, who lived in Tikawiti at the time. And he was very sick. He was bailed up in bed. It was night time. He was in a dark room. So my grandmother took me over to the bed. He was obviously in a lot of pain. And she said for me to place my hands on his puku, and to think about the stars, and to reach for the stars within my mind, and to place those stars and the energy and the mauri of those stars, to pull them from the heavens above and to channel them through my hands and into his puku. Now, this is me at 5 years old. And then within that moment of time, I don't know how much time had passed, but he seemed to have been alleviated. His pain subsided and he went into a deep sleep. And then my nan and I jumped back in the car and drove all the way back to Hamilton. In those days, it was a long drive. So yeah, that's my story.
Ka pai. Tēnā koe, Nick. Thank you for sharing your journey with us, and we look forward to hearing from you more throughout the evening. And also to you, Pia, welcome aboard. And yes, certainly thank you both for joining our webinar this evening. If I can start with you, Pia, and I guess it's kind of, let's talk about it since it's happening around us right now. It's COVID, it's the pandemic. I just want to know, Pia, we know that with COVID, there has been a strong advocation of getting vaccinated. Do you think that rongoa Māori has a role to play in this space in terms of vaccination or a fight against the virus, in terms of protecting our whānau at the moment?
Definitely. I think our role with our traditional Māori medicine, rongoa, we're better at that for doing preventative measures. And so by having our herbal teas, there's the ever popular kumarahau and then the kawakawa. So, having those two together as a tea, and that boosts our immunity because I do it with my kids too. Also doing tinctures. So our tinctures with our vodka or our apple cider vinegar for our tamariki. So just a couple of drops under the tongue. And but it's like our relationship with kai. So how cousin Nick talked about rongoa as a whole well-being, that's the same thing I look at rongoa as well. And so you take into consideration, what are we eating? And so, obviously if we're going to have things that are full of sugar, where it's going to turn into something else. Maybe we might be more prone to getting the flu, or our kids might get chesty, when we're in damp houses with our housing being mildew. And so that's a basic one I'd do is a white aka or a tonic. And so just having your kumarahau or your kawakawa and just having, just a shot of it. And so usually when I feel my system coming down, even my kids, so I've got 2 teenagers at the moment, and, they think they're robust outside in a singlet or no pants, showing off, whatever, doing basketball tricks. Next morning, sure enough, there's a cough, I told you, to me, and they're rolling their eyes. And, like their palate, because they still like, oh, do we have to? Because the taste, they love those sugary drinks, those fizzies. But I say, would you rather get sick? And they don't want to. And I said, I've got to keep you well so you can do my dishes. And so they'll have the kumarahau drink. And sometimes I'll, make it more palatable. I might mix it with some honey and hot water. So so at least they're consuming it. Also, another way I do it is our oil. So cooking oil, like with our olive oil, it's infused. And so I put that in with our kai as well. So I know, unknowingly to them, but I've already infused the oil. So, and that's a good immune booster as well.
Yeah, you've certainly provided us with a lot of good advice there. I noticed that you touched on tamariki and rangatei. We're going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. But Nick, if I can come to you, and I guess I want to try and not be too political with this question, but do you think that during the pandemic there enough wasn't done to promote the use of rongoa Māori, and that our own traditional and cultural beliefs were sidelined? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Te Waka o Matariki, a lot of the areas and sectors that we delve into with traditional Māori healing is that we delve quite heavily with an agency, and also like with Cousin Pia into clinical settings. So what we found what was a pattern that was building and a momentum that was building within our people, and this was driven from a grassroots level, this was driven from our people at the time of the pandemic, was their want and their search and their need to engage with traditional Māori healers within this current time, okay? So I guess this has been, if we look back in history, we can see that this pattern is not uncommon. Is usually when our people come into crisis, they will mostly go towards the guidance of tōhunga or the traditional Māori healer or the healer that is within their whānau to help navigate them through that crisis. So this was quite an overwhelming surge because for us as traditional Māori healer practitioners, what we have found is that I've been doing this mahi full-time for maybe coming up 10 years now. So when we started 10 years ago, full-time Māori healing, what was quite noticeable is that there was a huge shortage of Māori healers there, to be able to operate within community and clinical setting levels. Okay, there were still, Māori healers that were within certain whānau. They had their auntie or their family member that was able to service a whānau. But what we found is that there wasn't those large capacities of Māori healers that were able to service large-scale communities and broader. So that's where with cousin Pierre and our cousin David Kukutai Jones, who also puts on his apologies for tonight and wasn't able to make it, that's where we and it really has been driven by Maniapoto Waikato traditional Māori healer network, where we've been trying to grow and develop that uptake in skill to be able to integrate it into a community and clinical setting level, because that's where people were going. Now, what we also saw is that the people wanted the service complementary. So they still wanted to engage with their doctors, they still wanted to engage with their health professionals, but they found that they were also wanting the cultural aspect of engagement as well. When the two came together, it was always a very powerful model of delivery, especially when that rongoa practitioner or that Māori healer operates in a complementary design with the Western paradigm, not against it, but working together. And that is the big push that we're doing currently, is trying to create those models, because where the level of where we've been able to get rongoa now is that we've created pathways of income streams, funding streams, so that if a rongoa practitioner wishes, and it is the wish of Pia that she wants to stay in Koha, which I said to cousin Pia, go for it. Stay in Koha, because you'll get the biggest learnings in Māori healing within that traditional paradigm. But also, when you're finished and you've garnered those skills within the Koha paradigm of Māori healing, there are pathways that we've set up with the network of other Māori healers to create funding streams so that you are able to generate an income to support yourself and your whānau as a traditional Māori healer. It was a very interesting, and it was actually not getting very political, but shall we go there, Cousin Winston? The Minister of Health from Taiwan, he came here to New Zealand and he asked to visit traditional Māori healers, and they didn't know where they were. So Te Waka o Matariki, our name was placed on the table. We had a contact there with amongst his group, and he came here to Hangatiki. He drove all the way and he came straight here to Maniapoto. And it was here that he delivered the kōrero to me, and he said, Māori healers, yous are the healers within your culture. The healers within my culture, within Taiwan, we value them. They work within hospitals. They are on the same income as surgeons. and they work side by side, hand in hand. And the past, from what we know from traditional methods, the present, and also future technologies. And this is the progression forward with rongoa, is the integration of advanced technology within rongoa. That's where it's heading to. To Kōhao, Lady Tureiti Moxon, where we are situated, Tuako Matariki, we are in a corridor where we're integrating traditional Māori medicines, rongoa rākau, miri, with very advanced technologies, hyperbaric machines, magnetic PEMF beds. They've got a $250,000 magnetic PEMF seat there. That's the only one in Australasia, and it's sitting right in Hamilton within a Māori health provider to Kōhao for our people to access. So yeah, not very political, eh?
No, not at all. But it was actually great to hear, the advancement in technology and the incorporation of that into rongoa Māori, and just the relationship between the Māori paradigm and westernized methods and the collaboration and the partnership. But I guess on the flip side, for you, Pia, we know that in the earlier stages of the pandemic, doctors, they were suggesting that rongoa Māori would not be as effective as the vaccine. So, looking back to, a few years ago when we learned more about COVID and learned more about the vaccine. And doctors were saying that the rongoa Māori would not be as effective as the vaccine. So what would be your thoughts on those comments now that we've kind of come through the pandemic? What would be your thoughts now, and I guess your responses if doctors were to say that to you now?
Well, for me, I'd respond straight away with, well, you're looking at the illness. So, and your preventative measure is by getting the jab. Yes, some people might want it, some people don't. Kei te pai, that's their choice. But I look at it like, if we're going to have our immunity boosters in place, then, in my own whānau, I'd be okay with my decisions. And I think that's where it lies, because there was so much pressure put on our whānau. And, the political outlook that's come out from there, it's been huge. But not that I've really looked at that, because for me, I just made sure that where I was, we were okay. And then the ones that are around me are okay. And because in hindsight, I don't watch TV. And that's not a purposeful thing. It's just, for me, it's never, I've always been too busy, or just trying to keep myself busy and growing my mātauranga. And that's where my outlook is for everything. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Just wondering, did you have any, Nick? Did you have any comments to that in regards to doctors
very naive? Probably a doctor that's been around for like 40 years or something like that. Very old. For me, being a lecturer down in Otago University at the medical school and also School of Pharmacy, we know down there that 70%, around 70 to 75% of all pharmaceutical medication has its whakapapa and origins from herbal medicine, rongoa rākau. So for a comment to be said like that, when he's basically disregarding the foundation of his paradigm, of the Western medical paradigm, which has really been founded upon rongoa. So he doesn't even know what he's talking about. Also, he mustn't know some of the new clinical research is that although a lot of it has already happened, this happened many years ago with very powerful pharmaceutical companies going into our bush. They know what's in there. And a lot of them extracting a lot of the DNA, the chemicals from our plants, and then without consent from Māori, going and utilizing those chemicals, synthetically manufacturing them and placing them in pills to then on sell for large profit without even talking to the tangata whenua about what they were doing. So this has been going on for years. Already there's a lot of large clinical research happening around horopito and horopito around the use of horopito within cancer. So we as Māori healers and rongoa practitioners, well, we already know about some of the use and utilization of horopito within that ailment. But that's only, like our Pia was saying, that's only one piece of the puzzle that we look at. It's not the totality of it. And that's what they miss, is that they utilize a Western whakaaro upon a system that is quite complex and it's whakapapa based. The genealogy of the plants, the genealogy of how those plants whakapapa to, just like how we call each other cousins, also the plants have their whakapapa. Some will work and enhance others when you bring them together, and then some don't. Yeah, so there's all those components as well within rongoa rākau.
And you certainly brought up some staggering stats there in terms of the genetics of modern medicine at this time. And I'm going to leave all of that kōrero there because we do want to talk a little bit about I guess what's happening now in terms of COVID. And Pia, if I can ask you, because we have a lot of whānau who are isolating right now because they have the COVID virus, and there are some whānau who have had COVID, but they're still not yet 100% back to the normal selves. So what would be some rongoa Māori that you would recommend our whānau to take, specifically looking at that COVID virus, having that virus and having come out of it?
So there's a few factors that come into that as well. So if we start looking at holistically, if we do we do our elemental signs in our rongoa, and would want to cover the basis of that. And so, like in one of the herbal teas I've got 4 different elements in my herbal teas, and that covers everything. So with me growing up, I never benefited from kawakawa by itself. I never knew why, because I just thought, that's it works for everybody else, but I thought, I must be an alien. It's not working for me, and so I would single myself out and not take part. Now that I've joined this journey, I've found it's all to do with elements. So I was a different element, and if we start going into that, we cover it all bases, and that's for COVID as well. That's what I'd mix in my COVID herbal teas, is the 4 elemental of the 4 elements in the rongoa, as well as there's a 5th one too, which is wairua. And so putting my mauri into that, and that just emphasizes your healing abilities. And then, so that's another different aspect as well. And I really enjoy that part of rongoa, is doing elements, testing them on myself. And it's worked for me, the herbal teas. I myself haven't caught COVID yet, so I can't comment on that part. But I always ask whānau and friends what their ailments were, how long they lasted, and the range is so wide. And, the smell, the taste, some people 2 months on still haven't gotten that back. And so I just think to keep that going, with your rongoa Māori, and having your herbal teas once a day, having nutritional kai, so having your vegetables, all that sort of stuff, it comes into play as well. How about you, Cousin Nick? Because would you have any intake on that one?
What was the pātai?
The with if you get COVID.
Rongoa for COVID.
Yeah, we know that we've had a number of whānau that have had COVID and are currently in isolation because they've got COVID, and we're just wondering what would be some rongoa Māori that you would recommend to help our whānau during that time.
Yeah, well, my cousin Pia was talking about, and she was talking about things that elementally connect with a person. So when cousin Pia is talking about, she's talking about the elements. So water, fire, earth, air.
Yeah.
And then she also mentioned the fifth one there, which is wairua. Okay, so that's one construct that cousin Pia uses. She uses that construct of methodology to direct her, to guide her to be able to deliver her rongoa. Okay, so one construct that I use is I look at the location and I look at where a whakapapa of the people and where they're from. So if I heard about that happening here in Maniapoto with whānau, then straight away I'd be going towards Kumarahau and Kawakawa. Because those rākau, that rākau is intrinsically tied into our DNA because our tūpuna were using that. Okay? So it's endemic. It's endemic to the whenua here. It's tied to the whenua here. That plant grows in the lands here. Because it isn't until you start to broaden your rongoa knowledge and you start to travel, you start to realize that these plants, and kawakawa as well, they don't grow everywhere around New Zealand, around Aotearoa. You begin to learn this really fast. So then you find what plants and what rākau are tied to the DNA and the tūpuna and the whakapapa of the land that the people live in and that their tūpuna used to live in. Here also alluded to around one of the pātai that she's received is around, can I just go and pick rongoa anywhere? It depends on, like I was saying, what construct of methodology you've been taught by your ancestors, by your nannies. If you've gone to the wānanga, te wānanga o Aotearoa, what they've taught you. So there's all different types of methods. But if you were to ask me personally, I would not go into a rohe that I do not whakapapa to and start picking those plants. Why? Because those plants are more than a physical thing. For me and how I practice, they have a spiritual element attached to them as well. So for me to connect to that plant spiritually, I need to be able to connect to the whakapapa of the plant. If I can connect to the whakapapa, I can connect to my ancestors. I can call my ancestors in, my tūpuna in, and they're right there beside me to help facilitate that very sacred moment for a rongoa practitioner, which is in the harvesting. It's very tapu when you're doing that. There's a lot of protocols and tikanga attached to that, and especially in that realm of the unseen realm. Tohu that are being delivered to you by the ngahere, by birds, by insects, by events that are saying to you spiritually, go home, don't touch these plants. It's not the right time to do that harvest. But if you're going in there with the whakaaro of that lady who asked that pātai, she is none aware of any of that. She is just going in to simply go and pick a leaf.
Yeah, absolutely. Ka pai, Nick. You've certainly shared some wonderful insights there. And just a couple of things. Just a reminder to our whānau that are watching that if you do have a question, if you've got a pātai, pop it into the Facebook comment section below, and we'll get those questions. We'll work our way through those questions as much as we can this evening. And Nick, you touched on the various elements, if you like. We've had whānau asking that we know that there are a number of COVID variants here in Aotearoa at the moment, and there's vaccinations for this and boosters for that. The question is there something similar for whānau in in Te Ao Māori, is there like a rongoa booster, if you like, that whānau could take as each new variant appears, or is it just on a different paradigm or level, if you like?
Yeah, I think Cousin Pia was talking about how rongoa is more traditionally for us. It's more like traditionally our service didn't really exist. There weren't like Māori doctors winding back the clock 1,000 years. It was why was that? Because we were all the Māori doctor. We all were imbued with the knowledge to be able to look after our well-being. Why? Because in looking after our well-being, we're not only looking after the physical realm, but also the spiritual realm, the kauairunga and the kauairaro, the terrestrial and the celestial realms. So that was quite prevalent within our culture, was around the heights of attaining balance in eating kai that is also medicine. So that's another big thing, is that we didn't really look at kawakawa like a medicinal plant. It was like what Cousin Pia was talking about. It was more like integrating it into our kai and into our food. So we were constantly eating our medicine. It wasn't a thing that we would go and harvest that because it had medicinal properties and then we would take it. So if anything, I would say around having those traditional rongoa rākau frequently within your diet. That's what I would be doing, is integrating it in, and not looking at a plant or a rākau as a cure. That's a very Pākehā whakaaro. You're like, oh, that plant there can do this. So, if you ever get like this, then we just go to that plant. Yeah. That's not really how the rongoa paradigm works.
Yeah, and that's a lovely whakaaro too, and a rather important whakaaro too. And I guess on the flip side for you, Pia, because I know a lot of our mamas out there who are breastfeeding at the moment, they're looking to boosting immunity for our babies through breast milk. And we know a lot of our mamas we're quite hesitant in taking the vaccination. And Cousin Nick just spoke about, rongoa being just part of our daily intake as such. So is it too late for mamas to start taking rongoa Māori to help boost the immunity for babies?
I don't think it's ever too late to take rongoa. I met a client of mine. She was 65 years old and had only recently, like end of last year, had heard about rongoa. And, she was part Māori, but she was brought up European. And so she was quite interested in, what to do and how to take it. And she felt she was being cheated. But then she looked after herself with kai. And so, her sugar intake was very minimal. And I think that's where the bigger picture for our mamas especially is, we got to look after ourselves firstly so we can look after our babies, because we do tend to forget that as, parents or even guardians. We tend to forget about ourselves and healers as well. That's the first port of call, is that we've actually got to look after ourselves first before we look after. Well, I mean, we learn our lessons. I've burnt myself out many a times and get up and do it again, and far out. Next minute, crooked. I tap at the window 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm listening now. Scaring myself far out. And it's, we got to take it as lessons, or otherwise it just keeps coming back and it gets worse. And so it's not until, we have a penny drop, so to speak, that we can always or it's always been there. It's just whether we've had the chance to learn about the mātauranga. And so, yeah, she was at the young age of 65 when she first started taking kawakawa tea. So we just started her off with the breaking of the leaves in steeped water. And with our mamas too. So, you know, if they're not breastfeeding, if, you know, their baby's on the milk, on the bottles, then they can incorporate it with their pani for their giving their baby a miri, or, you know, we've got these different plants that can help babies for rashes. And, you know, it is sad to hear that some of our babies do get COVID. I don't know anybody personally that their pepes and their tamariki have had COVID, but, you know, I'd try with those sort of elements to help them. And especially if they're used to having that medicine from the doctors and from the, you know, psychologists and people like that, they get prescribed that because, you know, for us as people, I think we listen. So when somebody tells us something to do, we adhere to it. And we're just like, okay, because, you know, it's a fearful thing when our baby or somebody that we dearly love is sick. And then learning to see the contraindicators in our rongoa. So like kawakawa is a blood thinner. So, you know, I'd advise people if there's somebody that's taking blood thinning pills, just to be aware of that, you know. Next minute sleeping, hey, for days. But just saying. And, yeah, so we have our contraindicators with our rongoa. I like to grow my knowledge from rongoa, you know, just try and intimately learn plants bit at a time and then grow from there.
Nice. Thank you for that that advice, because I know that a lot of our mamas, you know, have been asking those questions. Cousin Nick, if I can come to you with a little bit of a curly question, and it's around hand sanitizers. So, you know, we've all become accustomed now to, you know, hand sanitizing before and after touching, you know, anything and everything. So has it become our friend or foe? And I guess what would be, if I can ask, what would be our traditional alternative, if you like, to a hand sanitizer?
Yeah, well, straight away, like with Cousin Pia, like I go to kawakawa. There's those antiseptic qualities within kawakawa. Also, going back to what we've already mentioned, kumara hau. So kumara hau has that quality that to be able to froth up and lather. So what would be a great combination is something combining the both of them, the antiseptic qualities as well as the natural lathering qualities of the kumara hau. If someone out there wants to try and give that a go.
Nice.
Well, what else, Pia, can you think of with the antiseptic and the qualities?
Well, for the rongoa diploma in Te Wānanga Aotearoa last year, we had to make a first aid kit. And in my first aid kit, I had made a hand sanitizer, and I used aloe vera juice. And so, you can get the concentrated stuff, but like it took a while to get all the juice out and strain it, and just kept straining it through. And it actually felt, you could feel it. It felt almost alcohol-like, you know, what our hand sanitizers feel like. You can mix that up with water to thin it out if you get the thick consistency. But I found that one to be quite useful too, was the aloe vera. Kawakawa, I actually, because I found after, I think it was about a month, I seen it just turning a different color. And when I added the kawakawa in it, it actually turned back to clear. And so, yeah, and, you know, that was just by me having a titter and trying to, you know, make it last. 1, 2, sharing it with the kids. 3, saving me some putia, because I was like, fair.
I think I think angi, cousin. Angi's got that really strong antiseptic quality as well. I think it might be a level above the antiseptic qualities of Pawakawa, a step above it. So that old man's beard that you see growing on like fence posts, and then if you go into the Nehenehenui, you'll see it all hanging down, all drooping down from the trees.
Yeah,
that's really the microbial. That really, it's quite potent.
Wow.
And it's an anticoagulant as well.
Oh,
so,
with the wounds.
Yeah,
put
with
it into wounds.
Well, and like so for whare tangata. Old days, like they used to use it as a kupi for wahine in their moon cycle, as well as a friend of mine, her dog got viciously attacked, and the wound, it actually had a flap and it opened up. And so she found, just walking the streets, she's got one of those flaps. And it was nipping, and next minute get a bite. She found that by putting angi in it, she wrapped it up, took it to the vet, and the vet was just so surprised because there was no infection, no swelling. Those are just common things that she was using it for. As well. Sorry.
I'm taking down notes as you share those wonderful insights with us. Pia, you kind of touched on this earlier on in the evening in regards to our tamariki mokopuna. There's been some research that's been shared by the medical news today, and it showed that children and youths had lower physical activity levels. They spent less time outside. They had higher leisure screen time, which meant that their bodies weren't using as much immunity protection as they normally would pre-COVID. So aside from getting our kids outside and more active, can you just remind our whānau of runga that might help for our tamariki rangatahi to maintain that strong immunity levels?
Wow, first thing I'd do is time that Wi-Fi. So I've done that with I know every parent laughs when I've said that. We've practiced it with my kids, and they come out moaning and groaning, but they eventually get it, and so we have a set time for them to go on, and then life happens sometimes. And usually when we get visitors or I've got an important meeting. Oh, then they go, so can we have it on now? That door. I'd get the kids into baking, and then, if they're not into cooking, I've taken them out into the Ngahere to come picking with me, picking rongoa. And there's moans and groans, but now when they've looked back on it, like we've been talking, and they said they've been sharing it in class because their teachers have asked, oh, what's that? And he goes, oh, well, Manuka's got this, and then they're asking, how do you know? Well, my mum does rongoa. So getting the whānau involved in what we do, and cooking's a really popular one. And so if we're going to be infusing our oils, explaining that process to them, and it's just planting that seed with our tamariki or our rangatahi, our mokopuna. Like I'm a nanny, and so I was doing soaps. She was only 1.5 when she came here, but just having her around, and then we'd go walking to the park, and then she's picking up little leaves and giving them to me, or she's calling it. And so involving them in that sort of process, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that our whānau will be taking those comments on board. If I can come to you, Nick, and in the research that had come out of that Journal of Medical News, so it suggested that, as the period of time in lockdown and social distancing increases, distress and loneliness will increase, and that is likely that the changes in the immune system would become more pronounced over time. So hearing that, what do you think our whānau could do to look after their immune system to combat the likes of social distancing, distress, and loneliness?
I touched upon a bit around my personal whakaaro about what's going on at this moment in time from a traditional Māori healer perspective. Okay, so the whole of humanity is going through a huge shift. Okay, everyone's going to be placed outside of their comfort zones. Okay, and a lot of things are reverting back to not focusing on things outside of oneself, but bringing things back into oneself. So focusing on you. So the thing that I would be asking is that if you are feeling uncomfortable with a lockdown scenario, what's so uncomfortable about it for you to be spending time with yourself? So that's a huge question. That's a huge resonance of what's happening through humanity, is that we really have all disconnected ourselves from who we are because we've been focusing too much on the outside things, too much on our job, too much on how much money can I make, too much on I need to get these kind of qualifications within university because I need to be like at this level in life, but not really focusing on who you are, who you are inside, and making that connection first. So within a spiritual dynamic, that has all been stripped from us, and we are being forced now to go back to self, which is the first point of all rongoa. For me, nothing can come of Māori medicine or Māori healing if we're not tracking first within my model of delivery, whakapapa, and taking that journey right back to the origin of ailments that are emanating and showing themselves, which is typically within yourself, and going back in time, going back to your childhood from where those things started from. So that's a typical journey for most Māori healers, is that they'll do that journey. You'll present them with something like, oh, I've got a really sore back, or oh, I've got a low immune system. But really, most Māori healers, like Pierre as well, we won't focus on that. We won't focus on like how a doctor focuses on and says, okay, we're dealing with your chronic back pain. Māori healers take that, that's part of the puzzle, and we start to build a huge picture around that. And that picture usually takes us back in time to the whakapapa and the point of origin of from where it first emanated. And then the journey starts. So most Māori healing, it's a journey that you go on to reinstate wellness, psychologically, mentally, physically, the wairua, the whole reinstating of wellness. Does that answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. Pierre, so did you have something to say there as well?
Yeah, definitely. And so we start looking at when they are doing that, they're not focusing on the present. So, like there's anxiety. Where does anxiety come from? Because they're thinking of the future, and then when they're depressed, they're thinking of the past. So you think about those sort of elements that come, or ailments that come into their holistic well-being, or they're that focused on the future that it's giving them anxiety. So we're having to fix, just a small part of it, cousin? So you're looking at it, that sort of aspect as well.
I mean, yeah, what you were touching upon, cousin, was like these are like what we talk about amongst ourselves as rongoa practitioners and Māori healers, is that we talk about how our paradigm is quickly changing from what we used to do to what we are wanting, and where through atua, really, through powers that are above us, where they're shifting things to where humanity needs to go towards. We talked about the rangatahi. Māori healers know, and spiritual people know, that the rangatahi are not like the rangatahi 20 years ago. This is a new wave of wairua, of rangatahi that are coming through. On an energetic level, they are way up there. They're very advanced on an energetic level, which is why they can pick up iPads and gaming machines and things like that. So what that's saying to us as Māori healers is that we have to rapidly evolve our tools as well. We have to evolve with times too, to be able to integrate our methodologies into this new wave, which is actually not new. It's all old. It's just swings and roundabouts. It's just that we've forgotten about it and it's just coming back. And because why? Because we had some fascinating Māori healers in our time, from Maniapoto here, that were integrating and changing what was back then very, very staunch things within tikanga. We had Koro Kapi Adams from Maniapoto here, developing copper coil boxes. So he had around him tōhunga, valid tōhunga back in those days, that would have looked at his method and thought, what are you doing? But they didn't really. They saw what he was doing. They saw that he was integrating and evolving the paradigm to be able to integrate it into the people at that moment in time. So this is nothing new. This is nothing new. And I challenge all the rongoa practitioners out there who think that our ways within rongoa should stay true to themselves. It never has. It never has. It's always been evolving. Māori medicine has always been evolving with the people.
Some very, very valid points there. And I know a lot of our whānau are taking down notes as our kōrero has gone on this evening. And just a reminder to our whānau that if you do have any questions for Pia or Nick, then pop them into the comment section on Facebook page, and we'll try and get to those as soon as we can. But if I can come back to you, Nick, and you might recall in a previous webinar, we've spoken about how best to protect ourselves, our wairua, our hinangaro, our tangata. So for whānau, where is the best place for whānau to start if they want to get themselves more involved or more aware, or using rongoa Māori as just part of everyday life? Where does one begin, or where does one start?
So I believe Pia's doing some. I believe Cousin Pia's doing some workshops. So refer to Cousin Pia. But for my whakaaro, at the minimum level, I was never taught anything. Really, I was never ever taught anything. I never went to Te Wānanga Aotearoa and went and did a rongoa course or things like that. What I came to understand is this with Māori. Everything that you need and that you want is encoded within you from your tupuna, within your DNA. All it takes is for you to remember it and to engage in it. Okay, it's just waiting there. It's just waiting there like a data bank in a computer, and it's just waiting for you to start to access all that mātauranga and that information. Okay, so that's one way to do it. That's one way, and that was the way that I engaged in it, was from a spiritual and a wairua way. Okay, now that is all within us as Māori. We can all do that. There's no that you're separate from one another. Why? Because all you have to do is count up how many ancestors you've got behind you and how many databases of knowledge and mātauranga are sitting there for you to access. Outside of that, Cousin Pia, do you know if Cousin David's still doing Te Wānanga Aotearoa?
Yeah, so there's the Te Wānanga Aotearoa courses. They've got the level 4 and level 5. They started at the beginning of the year. So when you sign up through them, also there's people throughout the year that run wānanga. How I stumbled across it, literally, I was going through a life-changing event, getting tossed around the room, and not knowing what was going on, My tāne didn't believe me. My kids were laughing. So it was like, my belief system is really low. Everything's low, like, poor me, poor me. But I scrolled on Facebook and I looked up healing. And then there was wānanga that come up. And so when we look up in those sort of sections, whānau, you'll see things that'll pop up. And then, usually if they do have payments and you tell them that you are interested in signing up for a weekend event, or it might be a one-day one, that they give you time to pay those off. And usually, it's for kai. There's services as well as accommodation. And then you can go to your rohe and look at the hauora spaces. So they usually have an events page, and they'll tell you there what they've got going on. And so here in Rotorua, they advertise it on their page. And that's just some of the ways, cousin, that you can get in touch. Or if you know a healer, they'll definitely help you, cousin Nick. They'll help.
Can't find him. No, they'll be hiding.
No, that's lovely. And I guess that you've kind of answered the next question that I was going to ask was around whānau who live in the cities, who live in, major urban areas where, access to the ngahere or to the bush is, somewhat limited, and, whānau who feel, disconnected from their whānau, from their hapu, from their iwi. And so the question was just around, where and how they can access rongoa Māori, and you've kind of touched on that, through the wānanga and through, contacting cousin Nick. I mean, I guess the first thing is about reaching out first and foremost to cousin Nick.
No, I'm enjoying retirement. What I'd say is this. I'd say this to our whānau, that if you were to reach out and try to engage with a Māori healer, just do a little bit of due diligence and do a little bit of, if you can find word of mouth. Word of mouth is really good, to get you your referral to that Māori healer, because just like in any practice, there are some people that, what would you say, Pia? There are some healers out there that have no foot traffic of people going to them. And there's a good reason why there's no foot traffic going to those Māori healers. However, it's always been a practice of our people to ask. Usually our people would ask the elders within our whānau, the nannies or the grand aunties or the aunties, and the aunties would know the point of contact for you to go to. That's a very safe way of engaging within Māori healing. The reason why is because Māori healers don't really come with, okay, this is my degree in Māori healing. See, you know that I practice safe practices, just like what cousin Pierre was saying. There are some very real side effects to Māori medicine that if you are on westernized medication, the contraindications will affect it negatively and compromise your health. Now, if the Māori healer isn't versed in that, then you could be potentially compromising your health. So word of mouth is key within our profession. Okay, word of mouth will give the mana. It comes back to mana. Māori healers have that engagement of mana tangata. It's the people that instate the mana into the Māori healer and validate the Māori healer that yes, that is our healer. You go to that person. It's also the people that will take that from the Māori healer and say, Carl, don't go to that healer. Go to this other one instead. Okay? So mana tangata and the word of mouth of the people is really important.
Nice, ka pai. And just talking about that engagement, because I know that time has gone on, but we do have questions that have come in from whānau. So let's just take a look at some of those questions. And this one here is from Pania, and she's saying, ngamihi koutou, how do we bring rongoa knowledge back and teach our whānau without tauiwi taking that knowledge for themselves and making money? And I'll probably start with you, Nick, because you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier on. So, what's your response to Pania?
Kia ora auntie, kia ora auntie Pan. Yeah, my whakaaro is that's been going on for a long time. It's been going on for a long time. And a lot of it has already been pillaged. A lot of the chemical natures that are within the plants have already been pulled from it, from those large pharmaceutical companies. What I would say, though, what they will never, ever be able to touch, and what people keep forgetting about rongoa, is the spiritual component. I would say, in my experience, that the spiritual component that resides within the plants is about 90% of what rongoa is about. So when they go and extract from their Pākehā paradigm the chemicals and things like that, they're only really extracting 10% of the magic. They're really not able to touch the 90% of what the magic is really about. Now, when they come and see things that happen within our clinical settings, Apia, they see these things, and they see things like, you used that kawakawa on that person with that ailment, and then you used it on this other person with this other ailment, and it worked. Why did it work for both those ailments? It should only be working for this ailment over here. And then we know that whakaaro that they're attaching to our plants, that only this chemical works on this ailment, and that's not Māori medicine. They're actually missing the whole plot. They're missing it. They're just not getting it. Yeah, whereas with Māori healers, because we're a bit cuckoo, like wee wawa, we get it. You know, we're like, oh yeah, that's called magic. That's magic. It just works that way. And then they're like, how did you know to use that plant on that? It's like me and cousin Pierre and cousin David, we're just straight up, we're like, the plant talked to me and it told me to use it on that person. And then straight away, that Western paradigm disengages and shuts off, because it's like, that does not compute. That does not compute. That doesn't fit into our box. What they're talking about does not fit. Yeah. So what we also have to understand, cousin Pia, is that the things that we're talking about when we're talking about rongoa and rako and stealing and pillaging things, we're actually talking about within the whakapapa of Māori, of the Māori culture. These are actually atua.
Yeah.
These are actually atua. These are actually our seniors that we're talking about. Okay, we only came along after the fact, you know, human beings, and then we were placed in roles as kaitiaki and guardians. And this is a story that I always give people, is that don't worry about atua, don't worry about those things, because they have the power to look after themselves. And there are many stories with Māori healers that know about the power of rako, the power of that spiritual paradigm, the atua that delve in there, that if they don't like something that you're doing, whether you're Māori or Pākehā, heart attack, dead. Oh, is that all right? No. Heart attack, dead on the floor. Hey, cousin Pia, you know, that they don't like, you don't need to intervene.
It's like, hey, I'm good. And
Okay. Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Whaapānia, and thank you for sending in your pātai. I know we've gone well and truly over time, but let's just very quickly take a look at one other pātai that's come in from Jeanette. And her question is, the mental health and the well-being of our whānau because of isolation needs a focus. How can we address this more? Would it be through karakia to create or re-establish the balance of the whole? And I know, Pierre, we kind of touched on this again earlier on.
Cool, frozen. Oh.
Atua. See, atua.
So yeah, to do with the question, you know, to create or re-establish the balance of the whole, I mean, that comes over to the hinengaro, and where our focus is, you know, we're mawiwi, we're sick, and we're confined to our spaces. So a person like myself, just a brief explanation is that I loved lockdowns because I was able to stay home and I was able to, work on things that I was passionate about, which is Te Ao Māori and healing. And so I got to study all those, I had access to the internet, to books, so I could go have a look up on the library, get them sent over to me. And so you're talking about, focusing and establishing. I'd establish where my mindset is first, because that, we can be scattered in so many ways with our kids. Our kids are sick. We're trying to put things into place while we're sick. And karakia is important. I find like that didn't come to me. So in my upbringing, I never really heard it much. So for myself, I practice it all the time. Like waking up in the morning, I get tohu, things like that. How about you, Cousin Nick? How would you answer that one?
Yeah, I think it's coming back to what we were talking about, cousin, at the beginning around what is the resonance that is coming from atua down to humanity? It's pushing us into those spaces. Okay, it's stopping us and it's making us as an individual and as a whānau and as a collective to stop in our tracks, to go back into self. Okay, so straight away when we operate clinical settings, that's the luxury of doing clinic and doing community koha-based rongoa services, is that you soon notice that within atua and within wairua, there's certain ripple effects or patterns of what's happening amongst the people. So 10 years ago, when I started doing rongoa koha clinic, it was all about diabetes and cancer. Diabetes and cancer. Everyone had diabetes and cancer. Okay, we've evolved from that now, where that's very few. And who's coming into clinic now? The pattern is mental health, schizophrenia, depression, anxieties. This is a huge resonance that's happening. So what is that talking about? It's talking about going back to the whakapapa and the origin of self, okay? Going back. That's what the atua and that is what wairua is wanting us to address, is to tidy up ourselves, is to resolve ourselves. The biggest question is why, though? Why? Because there's more to come. There's a bigger journey to come for humanity. But we can't go to that next level, and we can't open that door unless we've resolved past traumas, Cousin Pierre. Some of it is intergenerational too. It's stemming right back through the tūpuna lines.
And like you touch base on that too, like, through miri. And then, when we start awakening those, when we're doing a healing on people, and, you can see some of them are so far attached from themselves, they don't even know, they didn't realize that was sore. Why is that sore now? And then suddenly they're crying. And that's that detachment that they've had because, we might be anxious about the future. We've been depressed because we're thinking about the past or, 5 minutes ago, things like that. And that's what it brings us back to, is being present, bringing it back to ourselves. Hey, cousin.
Yeah, it all comes back to self. Yeah.
Thank you for your responses there, and I hope for you, Jeanette, that answers your pātai. And I just want to say thank you to those that have put their questions in this evening. I do apologise that we have run out of time to get to all the other questions that have come through. But I just want to say thank you to you both for sharing your whakaaro, sharing your experiences with us this evening. I know a lot of whānau have been, writing down a lot of notes and are looking to engage in this specialty, if you like. With the remaining 30 seconds that we've got, if I can just come to you, Pierre, first of all, just I guess with any final words, in particular, maybe just some tips or advice for whānau out there who might be looking towards rongoa Māori as a avenue for them to move into.
I'd say follow your heart, whānau. Hear your calling. It's within us all, in our fingers, in our DNA. And you'll find, as soon as you start making contact, touching, reconnecting with yourself, lighting your light bulb back up, sewing your feathers back into the right place, you'll find your grounding and you'll find your path. So kia ora koutou.
Ka pai tēnā koe pia. And for you, cousin Nick, what advice, what guidance could you provide to our whānau who are, I guess, looking at rongoa Māori for an overall boost of one's immunity?
Yeah, I think that our whānau, firstly, like what cousin Pia was saying, is recognise the heritage and the whakapapa that you of Maniapoto come from within Māori healing. The Māori healing and the Māori healers that we come from were in the past very, very well known, very, very infamous, and provided a lot of healing all over Aotearoa and travelled as well. So all of that capacity and potential, like what cousin Pia was saying, resides within you. It's just a question of how do you want to start your journey. Everyone's journey is different, but with that, you have all the support of us here to help you as Maniapoto with your journey ahead. Kia ora.
Ka pai tēnā kōrero. Look, I just want to say thank you both for your expert advice and your insightful opinions this evening, and also for the important mahi that you both continue to do, being there and supporting our whānau, not only during this pandemic, but over the many years that you have been practicing in your field of work. Pia rongo, Nick Pua, thank you very much for allowing us to be a part of your evening tonight. E mena ki a kōrua.
Kia ora, cousin.
Kia ora. Well, e te iwi, that wraps up our session for tonight. We hope that the kōrero share tonight gives you a better understanding of how you can look after your immunity, look after yourself as we head into winter, and also just a general insight into rongoa Māori. Remember, e te iwi, that MFM will keep you up to date with any breaking news and the latest developments across our various platforms, and we will be back soon for another live Q&A here on Te Puna Kōrero o Te Nehenehenui. Thank you for joining us this evening. Look after one another. Stay safe. Take care. Kotahi, ki te kotahi te waihoe, ka ora te iwi. Pō Māori e.